All right, what's going on? Welcome to the channel. In this video, I am going to be breaking down 4 different elements that you want to have in place alongside your LLC. I see this mistake often where someone thinks just because I have an LLC, I'm automatically entitled to some business credit cards, some business lines of credit, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So my entire goal with this video is to not only give you something tactical and strategic that you can implement as soon as you finish watching the video, but also to correct some misinformation that's out there that I think is actually hurting people far more than it's actually helping them in their journey of building business credit and scaling their businesses through obtaining business capital. Now, really quickly, before taking you over to the other side where we're going to dive into the material, let me know down in the comments what type of business you currently run and how long you've been in business. Other than that, I will see you on the other side. Let's go. All right, so here are 4 things that you want to have in place with your LLC. Again, if you want to access some serious business credit. Now, I'm going to run you through 4 of the main, I would say, components that I see our clients that we deal with of just things that really just adds rocket fuel, right? Some of these things may seem like, well, Irv, is that really going to be that big of a deal with a bank or with a credit union or with a lender? And I can tell you from experience, I've seen quite a bit of these files into the hundreds, if not thousands, where even the smallest thing can throw off a business from getting access to some business credit, whether it's a business credit card, business loan, or business line of credit. And so the first thing that you, of course, want to have in place, and you'd be surprised how often this piece is missing right here, is an EIN. Now, before you log off the video, before you say, okay, look, dude, I already know this, I can't stress this enough. Even though you want to have strong personal credit, which is built through your social security number, you also want to have strong business credit, which is ultimately going to be built out through your EIN. I get this question quite a bit where someone says, well, Irv, what happens if I have a sole proprietorship and I have an EIN? Is that going to help? The issue with you having a sole proprietorship, which is why I tend to lean more on having an LLC, having an S Corp, having a C Corp with your EIN, is because, again, there's no separation between you and the business, right? We've talked about this in other videos, and if you haven't already checked those out, I highly recommend that you check those videos out because you're going to be able to find some key information in there as well. But I really want to stay on task with the EIN and why this is important. With the EIN being essentially the social security number for your business, what ends up happening is that even though the funding that you get, so let's say you get a $35,000 business credit card with US Bank as an example, or with Truist as an example, and that $35,000, you go to use it, you're still reaping the benefits of getting the reward points, getting the travel, being able to, build out your MRs, your member rewards that way. But the upside is that none of that usage is actually getting reported over on the personal credit side, which is a key component when you are starting to play a bigger ball game. And let's say you have a construction company, because we deal with construction owners all the time, where they'll say, hey, Irv, I have a big project coming up and we need to access at least $150,000 in business credit lines so that we can fund either half of the future project or the full future project. Because you guys know that, especially with that line of work, you have to pretty much pay it up front and then you get paid on the back end, at least for that type of service, right? And so what ends up happening is that a lot of these guys and gals that own these construction companies, they can only move at the pace of how quickly they're able to liquidate their lines and use them. The issue that they tend to run into, though, is that with some of these bigger projects, is you end up using these credit lines, and then that credit utilization ends up getting blasted over on the personal side, which ends up dropping your personal credit score. Now, if you've ever been able to relate to that, I mean, I know that I have. Before I started figuring out how the business credit game works and how to start establishing business credit so that I don't have to use my personal credit, I would run my personal credit through a mill. And I would say, oh man, well, I guess this is what it takes to build a business, right? But there's a smarter way. There's a far easier way. And the easier way is going to be building out that business credit, again, through the EIN. Because the second thing, or really the third point that I have on here, is that the debt follows each EIN. And this comes up quite a bit as well, where, hey, what happens if I have an LLC and I have multiple, let's say, DBAs under it? Can you do that? The answer is yes, right? People do that all the time. The problem with that, though, is that even though you're using that LLC to fund maybe multiple businesses or ideas that you have under the DBA, remember the EIN or the debt on the EIN is only going to follow that EIN. So what we typically recommend our clients, especially if you've already found product market fit, if you've already found a business that works for you and that's producing some cash flow, or that you're just confident enough to go out, personally guarantee some business funding, you can then go out on the back end and say, you know what, I'm going to use my personal credit as leverage to get access to some business credit, right? That's known as personally guaranteeing. And then what ends up happening is, now let's say you have LLC 1 and LLC 2. Each of them has their own EINs, and now you're able to build out business credit profiles for each of them. Versus, again, if you had 4 DBAs under an EIN, you're going to be capped out. You're going to be limited, right? And so that's the main thing that I see with EINs. But the second thing that you want to pay attention to is you want to have a designated location for your business. Now, this right here, if I had a nickel for every time it flags someone inside of a banking system, like, you'd be surprised. If there's a piece to this entire video that you want to pay attention to, it's this right here. The designated business location for your business, I would say it's one of the most important things that you want to have, obviously outside of being in a low risk industry, which we've talked about, being in an area that's actually going to get you funding. So if maybe if you're not in a dense area with a lot of banks, a lot of credit unions, that can obviously hinder your chances of being able to get access to more business credit. But the designated business location is huge, because we've seen clients that they have everything intact. They have, on the personal side, they have over 780 credit score. On the business, they're inside of a low risk. They've been filing their taxes over the last 5 years. They have profit and loss statements. They have employees. All of their books are up to date. They have business revenue upwards of $150,000, $200,000 a month, like big businesses. And just because one of the addresses was off on the application, because remember, all of these systems talk to each other with different databases, which I'm going to get to here on our fourth point. So stay tuned for that, because it all ties in. If there's a piece to the pie, especially with a business address, which is one of the key components that banks and business bureaus use to validate a business's legitimacy, if that information is off. So example, if you have a business address, but the business address that they have on file is really your home address, and then your home address, they have it on file, is really like an old address, that can just raise an automatic red flag. That can either if you were going to get approved for a $45,000, let's say, business credit card, $45,000 business line of credit, that now maybe gets cut in half, because now that you're seen as a little bit more risky, even though everything on paper is pretty much on point. Or B, you get denied altogether, because again, you're high risk, and then you're left scratching your head, but wait a minute, I did everything right. So this piece right here is, again, one of the main things that I see a lot of people get held back by, which is why you want to pay attention to this right here. You can use a registered agent. So if you're taking notes, registered agent, you can use a virtual office, and or you can use a brick and mortar. Any one of these combinations. And the reason why registered agent, if you're wondering, okay, can I be my own registered agent? Yes, you can be your own registered agent. If you went through like Inkfile, or if you went through Rocket Lawyer, right? Those are like third-party services that they can set it up for you, or even a local maybe attorney that set it up. Sometimes they'll set themselves up as a registered agent for the articles of organization to receive paperwork, things like that. Just keep in mind that if you were to set up yourself as a registered agent, you would want to be careful of the address that you put on file. Because remember, this is going to be public information, which is why so many people opt out to have somebody become a registered agent for them, so that their personal information isn't out there. So if you wanted to say, hey, or if, I want to kind of, control this thing, I want to have full control. If I wanted to become registered agent, what should I do? At that point, you may want to consider, if you don't have a brick and mortar that you can just list as the physical address and the mailing address for yourself, you can go ahead and use a virtual office address. If you use that virtual office address, you can go back into either Secretary of State, you can hit up your attorney, you can have them switch up the mailing address that's seen on the public website, because that way you have a little bit more protection. It just looks a lot cleaner with your information being out there, right? The second part of that is it also matches across the board. So when you do go to apply, right, the registered agent and you as the principal and the business as the mailing address and physical address, it all links back to, say, that virtual address versus you having a bunch of scattered addresses wondering, okay, why am I getting denied? I promise you, again, if there's any piece that you want to pay attention to, it's this right here, because so many people end up getting denied for it. So pro tip, you want to get yourself a good virtual address, not the ones that look like a shopping plaza. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. It looks like there's like a meat market, and then across the street, it looks like it's a haunted house. You want to get a virtual address that when you Google the address, because it's what banks do now with AI is getting a lot smarter, right? Artificial intelligence. It looks and it presents like an actual office, whether it's an office building, whether it's an office suite. But you don't want the bank, you don't want the banker and say, hey, you know, the address that you have on file on your LLC or your articles of organization, is this where you're at right now? You tell them, yeah, that's my office address. They're going to do a quick search. I'm going to tell you what they're going to do. They're going to do a quick search, and whatever they see on that end, they're just going to use that point to either put it in your favor or hold it against you, kind of like what they do in the court of law. That's why these data points are so important to know. Number 3, business phone number. Now, I won't spend too much time on this because you can still get approved for business credits even if you're using kind of like a personal number, right? But you want to be able to differentiate business phone from your personal phone. If you want my professional, my honest opinion, get yourself a business phone number. Apart from you being able to do some things with it, with, you know, writing off some of those plans and the usage off of your taxes, speak to your CPA, right? Going in, building out some business credit through either T-Mobile or through Verizon, some of the credit lines that they offer. You can get some of that gear. You guys can use, I believe it's section 179 of the U.S. tax code. Again, speak to your CPA. But those are some of the advantages that you can tap into if you are using your business phone number, because now you're linking everything to your account for that business. What this means is that when you are filling out a business credit application or when you're going through a round of funding, like I usually tell my clients, you obviously want to list your personal phone number where it says your personal phone number, and then your business number where it says your business phone number. Sometimes you'll run into a bank or a lender where they'll say, hey, can we see, or do you have a different business phone number where you actually receive business phone calls? And so if you have a log, or if you have like a schedule of when you take business calls versus when you have personal calls, you're going to want to let them know. So I always tell my clients, hey, the less paperwork that you have to provide, the better, right? Because it just throws way less wrenches into the equation. And so good rule of thumb is the less paperwork that I have to provide, usually the easier it's going to be to get approved on the front end initially, because it's going to be much faster. And that's the whole point of this. And so this can make or break your ability to get funding, which is why if you wanted to set up a quick VoIP number, you can set that up. Sometimes some of these virtual offices, they'll have an add-on, an extra $20-30 a month, and they give you an actual phone number, whether it's a 1-800 number or a number that you can add to the 401 directory, which is another data point that you can use to, again, build out your business credit profile. Apart from you having your personal phone number, again, it separates you from the business. You have that phone number. So if, let's say, there's a bank or a lender that you know they're going to be a little bit tighter, but you really want to work with them, right? Because they're maybe lending out way more money in your area compared to other banks, because we're starting to see that some banks start tightening up depending on economic conditions, right? You can then use that as leverage to your advantage for what? Extra 20, 30, 40 bucks a month just off of this one data point right here. Again, banks use AI, artificial intelligence, to determine the legitimacy of a business. And so if they see, okay, wait a minute, this is a personal phone number, at that point, they may ask you for additional documentation, which again, we just want to work around that. And so one of the workarounds is exactly what I'm telling you. And so if they see, okay, this number is listed in the 401 directory, this number is only associated with this business, it's only associated with this line, at that point, it's going to give your business a far better look. Now, last but not least, this is major. I'm going to slow this part down, because if you've been building business credit for some time, then you're probably familiar with these companies right here. And if this is brand new to you, then I want to introduce you to some of the big players in this space. You have the SBFE, you have Experian Commercial, you have Dun& Bradstreet, you have Credit Safe, and you have Equifax Commercial. Now, these are essentially the companies that host all of your business information. Each of them is going to get a little bit of different information, a different spin, a different POV, point of view about your business, and they're going to report it. I want you to think of this similar to what happens over on the personal credit side, where let's say if you have a credit card that only reports to TransUnion and Equifax, again on the personal side, but that data point doesn't report to Experian, it's similar to this, right? Or if let's say and you pull up your personal credit report for TransUnion and Experian, and you have maybe an old address out there that you used to live at, but then Equifax has your current new home and mailing address, it's similar to this right here. And this is kind of like the invisible hand of when people say, well, why am I getting denied? I have, again, the good credit. I've been banking with maybe my bank for a couple of years. I'm pretty liquid. Like, what's going on? And although everything that I just finished mentioning is obviously something that you want to have going for you, you also don't want to sleep on this. So I'll run through these pretty quickly because I don't want to spend too much time on this. This could probably be a completely separate video. But you have the SBFE, which is a small business financial exchange. Now, the small business financial exchange in it of itself is not a business credit bureau. They are an information gathering agency that these credit bureaus essentially use to pretty much go in there and see, okay, hey, can we have maybe a backup source, or can we kind of second check our information to make sure it's accurate with what we have, right? So if I were to kind of tie this into how it kind of correlates to personal credit, think of it kind of like if you have Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, and then maybe they'll probably look into LexisNexis or CoreLogic, right? Those secondary agencies where you have the big head honchos are looking into the secondary agencies to make sure that they have all the information that they need to maybe validate a debt or validate a collection, make sure that they have all of their I's dotted and T's crossed. It's the same thing, but now you're seeing it at a larger scale in the business credit world. And so the small business financial exchange, the way that it typically is that typically I'll use American Express. Usually some of those payments, or essentially those payments, will report from American Express over to the small business financial exchange. And the small business financial exchange, that's where Dun & Bradstreet is going to capture that data for American Express. Because sometimes people say, well, Irv, I have American Express, but I don't see it reporting. Oh, believe me, if it's reporting. You're just not seeing it get reported. But believe me, it's reporting. Experian Commercial and Equifax Commercial, those are pretty self-explanatory. Again, trying to keep this part a little bit tighter. Don't want to go too long with this. But those are pretty self-explanatory, where similar to how they operate over in the personal realm, they are capturing your data inside of the business realm. And so if you wanted to build your Experian accounts, and if you wanted to build your Equifax accounts, you really want to focus on actual financial accounts, not just vendor accounts. I know a lot of people, they say, hey, I can't seem to figure out how to build out my Experian business or my Equifax business, which again could probably be a completely separate video. But you want to focus on the financial accounts, not the vendor accounts, which in this case, it's going to be net 30s. Now, if you wanted to build out your Dun & Bradstreet, which is the largest business credit bureau, at that point, you would use the vendor accounts, which is net 30s, net 15s, net 45s. Those are things like your gas cards, your Shell, your BP. If you wanted to go maybe Summa Office Supply, Granger, Quill, Uline, right? Those are all those net 30, net 45 accounts. That Dun & Bradstreet is going to be one of the fastest scores that you can build out. If you're doing it right within the first 90 days, you should be able to have at least an 80 plus paydex score, especially if you're laying out the right accounts in there. And then lastly, you have Credit Safe. Now, Credit Safe isn't as big here in the US as it is over in Europe, but a lot of what I would say these European dealers tend to look at Credit Safe a bit more than maybe some local companies do. And so if you've ever wanted to maybe get a vehicle with maybe Volkswagen, Mercedes-Benz, some of them are going to take a closer look over at Credit Safe, because that specific bureau right there is a bit stronger overseas over in Europe than it is here. Now it's starting to get used a bit more here in the US, which is why I wanted to present this to you, right? Small Business Financial Exchange, Experian, Dun & Bradstreet, Credit Safe, and Equifax. Again, if you have information that's mismatching, whether it's an account that's not reporting the right address, or maybe if you had maybe Irv and Friends LLC, and then maybe in the two other credit bureaus, it's Irv LLC, that's not the same business, so that you know, right? And so when they start to kind of weigh that, that can get flagged as well, which is why you also want to keep an eye on these matching credit profiles. So that's essentially it for these 4 main data points that we usually walk our clients through when we're taking a look at their business credit profiles, and we're helping them establish, okay, what can we fix? What can we look at? How can we kind of like reposition your business so that it stands a fighting chance against some of these bigger businesses when you're trying to go out and get funding from some of these banks. And so these are some of the data points that you really want to pay attention to. And yeah, this is definitely going to be a video that you want to go back and maybe take notes on. There are some parts in there that we moved maybe a little bit faster on. Let me know if there's any one of these 4 components that you want me to make a full video on, whether it's matching credit profiles, business phone numbers, designated business locations, or even a deeper video on EINs. We'll love to hear your feedback. Let me know down in the comments. So there you have it. If you found value in this content, consider hitting that like button down below, because it does help this channel reach a larger audience. If you haven't checked out our second channel, Insight with Irv, it is our podcast style channel. So if you like what we have going on over here, you'll love what we have going on over there. Once again, I appreciate you guys checking me out. Till next time, everyone, I will see you in the next video.